Welcome to Her Life Unscripted podcast, inspiring burnt out, stressed out, and stretched thin women to embrace the unscriptedness of life. Hosted by Anna Osborne.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Her Life Unscripted, episode 36. I'm really excited to be here with all of you today. My name is Anna Osborne, for those of you that are just meeting me for the first time, and I'm just really excited to get to know all of you. So, funny introduction for those of you that have been listening for a while, but for those of you that are new listeners, I just wanted to formally introduce myself. It's crazy. It's the last week of the year, and that to me is absolutely mind-blowing. What I love about being able to put out this podcast is that some of you are listening to this next year, right? Like the year has come and gone and you just started listening, which is really cool. And I think what's really neat about it is that although this is the last week of 2016, that what we're talking about today is going to apply all year long. And so that's just a really neat way to be able to talk about what's happening right now in our lives, but also recognize that these are ongoing topics that we want to continue having very rich conversations around. So we are here. We've survived 2016. There have been some ups and there have been some downs, my friends. And, we're wrapping the year up, and I think it's a good time to kind of be reflective. For those of you that have been listening, you know that we have been spending the month of December talking about giving, right? And we have highlighted a nonprofit that I really believe in and that I have worked with for many years. It's actually the agency that I worked with that gave me my first start in this field, and that is something that I'm forever grateful. It's funny, reflecting back to that time, almost 13 years ago now. I started with them in 2004. I was so nervous to start seeing clients and being looked at as a psychotherapist, right? I was young when I went through grad school, and I had life experience, but nowhere near compared to the life experience that I have now. But I had a very open heart, a heart that wanted to give and wanted to serve and wanted to learn. And when I got hired, or hired is the right word. I was a volunteer, but I still got hired on and went through the interview process for Weave. It was really overwhelming. I mean, I don't even remember. I remember where I sat in the waiting room before the interview, but the rest is kind of a blur because Weave is so well known in the community, in the Sacramento community that I live in, and it just does amazing work. And so to be accepted there as a brand new therapist who was in grad school to really just start doing therapy, it was a really overwhelming experience, and also one that was intense, right? Working with survivors of domestic violence and sexual assault is probably one of the biggest honors that I've ever had in my entire life. Domestic violence and sexual assault does not discriminate, and I think that we are given a version of what that looks like in the movies, Sleeping with the Enemy or a Lifetime movie, right? And that's not necessarily what domestic violence looks like. It looks like control and verbal abuse and isolation and all these psychological traumas, not, on top of potentially the physical traumas. So it was a really overwhelming experience, but it was so humbling to be able to have people that were so deep in pain trust me to just be on the journey with them, right? I didn't have the right words to take away their pain because there are no right words, but being allowed to let them feel a little less alone was just incredible. And so this entire month of being able to highlight that agency and really inspire all of us listening and all of us kind of living and breathing, that if we are so inclined to give, that it is an amazing organization to give to. And if we want to keep our giving close to home, really encouraging you guys to hop online and find an agency that you believe in that's doing really powerful and necessary work, and inspire you guys to give as well. So that's really what we have done through the month of December, is not only highlight Weave, but also talk about what it means to give. Our one show is based on, that in order to achieve greatness in our lives, it needs to be done with service, not with status. And then last week we talked about this idea of that when we're giving, that oftentimes we can feel like enough is enough, like I have nothing more to give, and really shifting our focus to be able to recognize that enough is enough. Whatever we have to give, whatever unique gift we have been blessed with in this world, that is enough. And if we are able to share that, that's amazing. So today, as we wrap up the year and wrap up kind of this year's shows, I just want to start by just saying thank you to all of you guys. I just went on and was kind of looking at the number of folks that are listening to the show. And just in the month of December alone, the listeners and folks listening grew by 35%. Yes, I'm a little bit of a math nerd, and I did the math because I was just so shocked to see how much our listenership really grew in November, and I'm excited to see how our listenership grows in December. I think that sometimes podcasting, it can be kind of isolating because I'm sharing and I don't know what it's like for you kind of hearing. And what has been so amazing about that is when you guys send in your audio feedback or your emails and you challenge me on things that I have said, or you offer words of encouragement, like that means absolutely the world to me. And when I see numbers growing, it's not from a place of, oh, good, like the show's becoming popular. It's, oh my gosh, like we're creating a community. Like that's really what inspires me. And so seeing how much our listenership grew in the month of November and then kind of seeing what happens in December, I'm just excited. And also, thinking about last week's show, Enough is Enough, is that if we kind of don't grow in December, that's okay too, right? Like that's not something I'm going to internalize and go, oh my gosh, you're wasting your time. Nobody wants to hear this. Absolutely not, right? Instead, I'm going to be inspired to make sure that I'm meeting your guys' needs. And so if there are people that you would love for me to interview or shows you really want to hear topics about, send that in. I am super happy to hunt down that guest and be able to have a conversation with them because I love learning from all of you and especially from the guests that are so generous to come on the show. So that's really kind of my gratitude or my appreciation that I have for all of you. And also I really encourage you guys to keep sharing the show. That's hard to say. Keep sharing the show because the more that our community grows, I just feel like this amazing ripple effect is going to happen around us. And I'm excited to be kind of in the beginning stages of really developing that. And your guys' feedback has been an amazing vehicle in order to really grow that. So that's really, I thank you guys so much. And I really encourage you to continue sharing the show, letting your friends know about it, sharing episodes that you feel like would be beneficial to people in your life. I have a good friend who was on the show, Michelle Ferris, and she's just a delightful person, as you guys got to know. And she will let me know of, hey, I listened to, this episode and I shared it with this person because I knew it really would make a difference for them. And that to me just means the world. It means that this content that's being produced is really applicable. So I encourage you guys to do the same. So as that is such a long-winded introduction, what I do want to talk about today is this idea of giving. And obviously we have been looking at that all month, right? But what's really interesting to me is this idea of giving. And you guys are probably going to pull your hair out with this one, so I apologize. But I do believe in giving, right? Like I think that's one of the most amazing things that we can do is live this purposeful life, to have a life of service. And with that being said, the opposite side of it is that we have to be aware of when we are giving versus when we are giving up. Okay. And so I want to slow down here for a second and describe what I mean by that. And so, like I said a moment ago, I am absolutely 100% believe in giving, right? Of being a service. Obviously, I went to a month-long series of shows if I didn't believe it was important. And yet I had the most amazing conversation with somebody a while ago. And I wrote about this just personally because it was so powerful, this conversation. It literally had me, in tears thinking about what we had talked about. And we talked about this idea that especially as women, right? This is Her Life Unscripted, so I can speak just to women, even though I know I've got male listeners as well. But especially as women, we give, right? That we by nature are nurturers, caregivers. And that's a good thing, right? I don't think that that's a sense of weakness. I think it's a strength that we have this part of us that is very nurturing. It is very caretaking, right? And oftentimes in our relationships, right, our day-to-day interactions, we are asked to give and give and give and give. And that's a remarkable thing. The problem is, though, when we look in the mirror and see that we've given up all aspects of ourselves in order to give to others, right? And so in this theme of the month, talking about giving and being of service. We have to have a barometer, right? Some sort of measuring device to be able to know whether or not we are giving because we have it to give, right? We're giving because it's part of what we're able to do versus we've given so much that we've lost ourselves. And I know for me that that's something that has impacted my life, and it's something that I've had to kind of pivot around. I know that, my husband and I got married in May, not this May, 9 years ago almost, but we got married in May, and we were living in Midtown Sacramento, and I love Midtown. Anybody that knows me knows that I love the Midtown area. I love the restaurants. I love the culture. I love just the atmosphere, the diversity of people. Like, I just really love it, right? And we were living in this cute little kind of cottage house that was right kind of in the hub of all the action. And then, like most married people do, we decided we needed to buy a house. I don't know. I mean, it's silly to me, but we decided we need to buy a house. We are married now. So we got married in May, and then the end of July we moved. And we moved to this little suburb right outside of Sacramento. It's only about 10 miles away, but it is very much a suburb, right? And so we had no kids at the time. We actually didn't end up having our children until 4 years later, but we were still living kind of a very young married couple's life, right? A newly married couple's life. And we moved to this little suburb, and all I saw around me was like big box stores and chain restaurants. And I just felt like, oh my gosh, what have I done? I've moved into this 3-bedroom house. Am I supposed to be having babies? Like, who am I, right? Like, this doesn't fit with the life that I've been living. And I remember going to a concert with some girlfriends, maybe a week or two after we moved into the house. And it was just kind of the girls who went to this concert. And I was totally out of it, right? I was just so tearful and just really just kind of out of sorts. And one of my best friends that I've known since grade school was there. And she's like, what's going on? Right? Like, there's something wrong. You just are kind of absent. What's going on? And I was kind of like a deer in headlights. And there was a part of me that was so scared to tell her I'm miserable. Like, we moved and I don't belong here, right? Like, I thought I was doing the right thing in terms of it's smart to buy a house and it made sense with the real estate market and all these sorts of things. And yet I'm flipping miserable, right? Because I thought that if I said that to anybody, all they were going to hear was that I was miserable in my marriage, which wasn't the truth. I love my husband. I still do, right? And I love being married to him. And it wasn't about that. It was the fact that we had made this decision to buy a house, and I don't know if I used my voice the best way. It made financial sense to move to this little suburb. It made kind of logistical sense based on the real estate market. But it didn't feel right for me, right? And so I was scared that I had given up too much, right? I had sacrificed in order to make kind of this decision, but it wasn't a decision that worked for me. And so what happened then is I was scared to talk about it because I thought, if I say that I'm unhappy, is everybody going to think I'm regretting getting married? I've been married for 10 weeks at this point. And it had nothing to do with that, right? It had to do with this house. And so thankfully, my best friend was able to really kind of slow me down, and she heard me. And I said, I'm scared to say this because I'm scared of how you're going to hear it. And she goes, well, just tell me. And so I told her, and she was just so supportive and so loving and was like, well, yeah, you gave up a lot when you moved and you probably weren't prepared for it all. And although this is just a very, very small aspect of what we're talking about today, right? Moving to a place that wasn't exactly what we thought it would be is so small compared to all the other ways we can give up parts of ourselves in our relationships and whatnot. It also, I think, really highlights of how quickly it can happen and how much we can be overwhelmed about talking about it. And so in this month, as we're talking about giving, I also want us to be able to be aware of when we feel like we're giving up and we're sacrificing who we are. Now, obviously the story had a happy ending. I was able to find some great running trails right behind my house that I wouldn't have had access to when I lived back in Midtown. And, we lived really so close to our very best friends who are just kind of down the street and around the corner. That was a gift I found in terms of moving here. And I started to find my, kind of my group at the gym and navigate the aisles of the grocery store and my little mom and pop restaurants that I love supporting, those, local small businesses. And so I found my way, but it took some time. And the piece of it that was so important is I had to recognize that I had given up part of me because I thought it was for the greater good, right? And it ended up being a great decision. We ended up having kids, and we have this, very beautiful home that we're fortunate enough to be raising them in. But in the moment, I couldn't see that. All I could see is everything that I had lost. And I was so scared to put words to it because I didn't know what people would think, right? Like, isn't that the truth? We are so scared to talk about our places of pain because we're worried that there'll be judgment or it'll be misunderstood. And like I said, it was an absolute godsend that I had that concert planned with friends because I so desperately needed it. And thankfully, my girlfriend was able to be very, very supportive with just hearing that I was going through an adjustment and I hadn't used my voice and I needed to find some ways to be able to kind of shift around to make sure that this move worked for me. Right? And yet I realize as we're talking about this, that we really can get stuck in this trap, right? Where we don't recognize why we're miserable, or we don't even recognize that we're unrecognizable. That sounds funny, but I think sometimes, we go through life so quickly and we make these decisions in this just snap, impulsive way because they are part of the greater good. And yet time can pass and we look up and we don't even recognize ourselves in the mirrors. So what I really want to encourage you guys as you are moving towards the end of this year is slow down a little bit. Like, let's evaluate a little bit. Are there ways that we have given in the spirit of being part of the greater good, and we don't recognize that we've actually given up part of ourselves, right? And if we slow down and we look at what we want to feel instead, right? Instead of feeling the loss or like we've given up part of ourselves, what do we want to recapture? And I think that's a really, really cool question, because I think about, the end of the year, we're oftentimes so much focused on New Year's resolutions. And I personally think New Year's resolutions are kind of this way to, okay, you can disagree, but it's a way that we can set ourselves up to fail because we're just looking at this goal, right? And we measure based on this goal. But instead, if we're really shifting to say, this is how I want to feel, right? I want to have this feeling throughout the year. I want that to carry me through. And that when I start wavering from that feeling, I want to be very mindful of my environment to come back to what that feeling is. And I think that we can do this beautiful blend between slowing down and recognizing the ways that we may have given up parts of ourselves without even noticing. We've made sacrifices for the greater good that really are not that great at all, and be able to slow down enough, especially during this reflective time of year, and ask ourselves, what shift do we want to have happen? Right? What feeling do we need to have in order to feel less alone with ourselves, right? Because if we're unrecognizable to ourselves, I would venture to guess that we're quite unrecognizable to each other too, right? If we don't know who the person is standing in front of us in the mirror, it's going to be a hard time for the people around us to notice that too, right? They're not going to recognize us because we've sacrificed so much too. So my challenge to you guys is that I want you to slow down, right? I want you to spend some time journaling. I want you to really be gentle with yourselves, acknowledging some of the ways that you might have given up parts of yourself because you thought you were just giving, right? And I want you to give yourself some grace, because as women, that is a very, very normal thing. And obviously the example that I share with you guys about moving was something that was a very simple example. And yet there are so many ways that it has happened in my life where I feel like I have given because I love to give, and then I realize I've given up too much of myself. So I want you to slow down first, and I want you to give yourself some grace if you recognize that you are feeling unrecognizable, okay? And the next thing I want you to do is I want you to really just sit for a moment and notice, what feeling do you need to connect with? What feeling do you need to start to kind of dust off that will help you feel more recognizable, right? What do you want to own? Is it a sense of acceptance? Is it a sense of a feeling of growth? A feeling of challenge? Is it a feeling of peace? A feeling of presence? Like, what is the feeling that you really want to have that will help you feel more recognizable? And lastly, I want you to come up with a plan of what makes you feel that way, right? So if my feeling is I want to feel more present, right? Like, that's the desired feeling I really want to have, because I have become unrecognizable because I'm going, and that's giving up too much of myself, and that's not working for me anymore, right? So let's say that's my desired feeling is being present, right? So what I need to do then is make up a list of what are the things that help me feel really present. Well, for me, is walking. I love to run and I love to exercise, but there's something about walking that helps me feel very, very present, right? What are the other things that help me feel very present? Journaling or writing helps me feel very, very present. I'm very in touch with my feelings in my body when I'm writing. And so those are things that help me, right? So identify those things and then weave them into next year, right? Have that feeling, that desired feeling, be your intention for the year. And so, for example, if mine is presence, then I will make sure through my planning for 2017 is to weave that into my calendar, identify the times and the places and the spaces I need to create in order to be present. And actually, what's been really cool is as I've been preparing for this podcast, I actually have been reflecting on this desired feeling to be more present, right? That I feel like I'm not giving up aspects of myself for the greater good when I'm more present with myself. And so I have been doing more writing this past week, and I've had some blocks of times where I've just been doing writing, and it's been amazing. Like, it's been so cool. And I think that's why I'm so energized to do this podcast right now, because not only am I asking you guys to challenge yourself and do this, but I've actually been doing it the last week. And it's been really, really cool. So I want to encourage you guys to continue doing it as well, and know that it works. So that is us. That is Her Life Unscripted for 2016. It has been amazing to be able to get to know all of you and really be able to launch this podcast into the world. I can't believe it's been 6 months and we're on episode 36. Like, that's wild and crazy to me. It has been such a labor of love, and it's been this amazing creative just avenue to connect with all of you. So just from the bottom of my heart, thank you so much for being a listener. You are changing the world just by this interaction that you and I are having. And no matter when you're listening to this, I'm excited to hear how you are really weaving in this idea of being able to recognize, evaluate, assess, right? Whether or not we are giving or we're giving up parts of ourselves, right? Is what's really going on. And that if there are parts of ourselves that we're giving up because we think it's part of the greater good, starting this practice of slowing down, identifying that, and then moving to saying, okay, what desired feeling do I need in order to feel more recognizable to myself? And what are the things that bring that feeling to me? And then start getting them on the calendar, right? Get them into the routine so that they're happening on at least a semi-regular basis. And the reason I love that word is because semi-regular is going to look however you want it to look, right? It can mean daily, it can be weekly, it can be monthly, and it's still semi-regular. So that, my friends, is our final show for 2016. Thank you so much for being a part of this amazing, amazing community. Please continue to send in your audio feedback via the SpeakPipe app. I love to hear from you guys, and I love getting your emails to anna@herlifeunscripted.com. And lastly, remember, we've got some amazing live events coming up in 2017, so don't forget to go over to the website, herlifeunscripted.com, under the retreats tab, and fill out your email and name to be able to be on the interest list, so that when those dates roll out, we really have a good, you're able to get them in real time and be able to put them on your calendar and attend if you're so interested. So thank you so much from the bottom of my heart. I am so appreciative and grateful for all of you. And I hope that you have had a very, very blessed year, despite all of the unscriptedness that has attempted to shift your life. I hope that you are more beautiful and more loving because of it. Take care. See you next year.